It's all right. No, really, you'll like it. It will grow. It'll grow on you. It's really good music. It's one of my favourites. Yeah, just worry about it. Just sit down, give it some time, give it a good listen. Yeah, don't worry about it. So I've come out to my kuti today, my sort of meditation space away from the house, a little way away from the house, and it's also a place where the sangha stays. It's a room where I used to stay when I was still in the robe, and there are many sort of souvenirs from travels abroad and gifts from my spiritual friends, books and so on I keep here. I come here often just to sit, contemplate, be quiet, reflect, read a little, so on. And today my reflections are very much around the Sangha and teachings, teachers. It's about a good 10 years since I disrobed and put down the robe, came to take care of my mother, who in her own way also looks after me. It's a kind of different family partnership and works very well, and I'm really quite content here. I have opportunity to pursue some of my arts and crafts, and for all these years I've always maintained a close connection with my Dhamma friends, mostly online, and a small number of local people here, and we discuss various topics and we meditate together. And in these years I've expanded my interest in some other traditions in the field of Advaita Vedanta and the kind of Gnostic meditative traditions. I'm not a terribly religious person, actually. I'm more a scientist, I suppose, and I'm interested in this word enlightenment. I'm interested in finding peace of mind, essentially, and a better understanding of my place in the world, if you like. And one of the things I've been reflecting on, especially in these fields of Gnostic practice, Buddhism, Advaita and so on, there's a great emphasis on teachers, teachings, and certainly in my early days within the Sangha, you'd get a lot of the discussions between the monks would be comparing one senior ajahn to another one, what they say or what we've read, and there's always a sort of a decisions to make as to perhaps who we listen to, who we go with. Some we're very fond of, some we're not very fond of, and all sorts of views and opinions arise around it. And for some this is very, very important. For some, I think after a number of years, I've been in close to this current practice for goodness knows 40 years now, in various levels, sometimes just fiddling around on the surface, sometimes really deeply wanting to delve more deeply into the practice. And one thing I've become aware of is how, if we're not mindful, or if we're not careful, it's very easy to make kind of snap decisions, or you can sum up teachers and guides and people around us very quickly, and which we tend to do. There's a lot of emphasis in our society about, first impressions, how a first impression might affect us. So I thought I'd share with you a dream I had actually when I was in the robe. It was So I very rarely remember dreams, but this is very poignant. It settled in my mind. It's never left me, and I was a dream about. So I was in the robe, and I was going in a desert. It was very, very dry. Probably a dream in the hot weather, and I was desperately thirsty and tired. I was walking along. I found myself near to a beach, rocky beach, and there was a little village on the other side of it, like a creek, and there was some water flowing out of the creek down a few rocks and into the sea. And I had a look, check the water flow, and it seemed very sweet, very clean. Smell, it seemed very good, clean water. So I decided I'd clean myself up before going to the village. So I took my bowl lid off and poured some water in to wash my face and slosh it about a bit and clean myself up. Had a little drink, washed a few things in the dust off me in this big bowl lid. And then I was tossing the dirty water away, and then there's this voice from the village. It was shouting, it was very aggressive. Oh, you! Very aggressive. So I didn't quite understand that. So anyway, closed up my stuff and stepped over the very dry kind of creek, but went up into the village. And I was continually insulted and abused as being the water waster. They'd seen me. I'd been seen throwing water away. And this was, in their light, a real criminal offence, water waster. And they wouldn't give me any food, and they were kind of throwing stones, and they were very aggressive. Water waster, And I remember this sense of feeling like judged in a way they didn't understand. I tried to explain, well, it was, it would have ended up on the ground anyway. It's just free flowing, and didn't want to listen. Anything I said, what they'd seen me throwing water. Therefore, I was kind of banished. Persona non grata, the waster. And I remember walking away in this feel of kind of tense, feeling very rejected and repelled and totally misunderstood. And it's a dream that stayed with me, and it's a feeling which we know, in real life, these experiences happen. Somebody will make an assessment of what we might have done and what we might have said, and then especially if you're in a community which has a particular angle, like in my dream, the water waster, they had suffering from drought or something, and it was very, very real. And the feeling of it, the sense of being in or being out, being welcome or not, being part of something or not part of it, and more powerfully feeling misunderstood and judged and for something that is not who I am, or what I'm doing. And certainly in these traditions, once you get used to being into a teaching role, people are looking at you very closely. And I remember feeling very relieved after when I first went out to the town, having disrobed, and I could walk through the shopping centre just before Christmas, and I was completely invisible. No one paid any attention to me at all. Whereas for 16 years, I was just constantly, people were, you're a bit of an odd one, in long brown robes and shaved head. There was always somebody watching, wondering what you're doing, And there's a certain sense of freedom from that. And the other side of things, of course, in other parts of the world, where in Asia, where they have a great deal of respect and so on, they have certain precious values around monastic sangha, quite different. They'll give you their seats. If you walk into a room, they all get up and sit on the floor, put you up on a chair, bow, very kind of respectful. And for a Westerner too, this can be, sometimes I found that awkward. When I first went there, I didn't know the language much. It was a little bit awkward, and felt, I'm not used to this. And I could see some Western monks also quite got off on it, quite enjoyed that, and got high on it, and rather treated some of the lay supporters rather not so respectfully. So there's the assessments we make and the judgments we make about one another are something which can really colour our practice, and it's often in doing this we miss a lot. I recall a number of times, hearing somebody had said or part of a talk, and I think, well, no, it's not really my thing. And I kind of, when they would appear, or someone would be talking about them, or talking, they'd be teaching something, I wouldn't pick it up, and my mind would move away from it. I think, I don't need this. And I remember later on hearing a recording from the same person. I thought, wow, this is really, who was that? Who was that? And I realised, here it is, I've done it again. I've just judged them. And I've missed it. I missed a point. And so in our search for enlightenment, in our search for understanding, elders are really critical. They are very much an important part of the whole tradition. And respect and understanding for those is something which I really feel we miss. And in the West, it's not that way, very rarely seen that way. I remember in Bangkok, passing a newspaper store, kind of magazine store. I have whole racks of magazines with elderly monks on the front. Long Dhamma, all these lovely old fellows with their big smiles and little captions from their Dhamma talks. Magazines, hundreds of them. Whereas in the West you probably get girly mags and things like that at the same place. And there's something very special about that respect for elders. And what I feel is important just to think about when we're choosing or looking at teachers and teachings, whether it's in Buddhism, there's too much really, there's such a lot of possibilities. We're really mindful and careful to be with our first impressions and judgments, because on numerous times I have been proved wrong, and it gets to a point in time where I kind of love being proved wrong. I love that surprise. I love realizing, this is much more to this than I thought. This is, I'm more receptive. And if we are really mindful and in the present, everything has a newness to it. We can listen to that same person for the first time, aware and awake and attentive. And sometimes a message gets through. I'm sure some of my old teachers receive this video, they probably think, it's him, you talked to him for ages, he never seemed to get the point. It's very likely true. But sometimes it takes a while to sink in. Another point is, I think for oftentimes we're not ready for it. We hear the words, we read the books, we see, and we're not kind of open for it yet. We're not ready to take that one on. And certainly the case for me, sometimes I just felt befuddled by somebody or some ideas, or I'm just not really picking up teaching till maybe some years later. And I thought, now I understand what he means. So before we judge and before we make assumptions, it's good to recognize this is a judgment and assumption, and it's not necessarily true. And when we are really mindful and present, the best position we can take is we just don't really know. I don't know if this is telling the truth, whether this is right or wrong. But I'm open, I'm listening. And have respect for that. I feel very grateful and moved sometimes when I hear the voices of my old friends. I miss them. I miss a lot of the kind of conversations we used to have. There's a lot of playfulness in the Sangha, a great deal of laughter, and a great deal of suffering, a great deal of struggles. And it's very interesting people would ask me before about the whole process of learning in these traditions. It's like developing wisdom or growing, widening one's field, if you like. And it's a mystery to me. It really is a mystery. There's great stories of some of the most famous forest masters who sometimes their most profound influential teacher is someone they just dropped in to see one time for a few minutes, for an afternoon. Like Lumpur Cha's meeting with Ajahn Mun, he was brief, totally changed his life. And yet, you may go to another forest monastery and there'd be a number of devotees living very close to him, working, serving him and so on, but never really seem to get the point. It doesn't get through to them. They may have the faith, but they haven't really penetrated to that lesson. They haven't got the message. And so this path is uncertain, and not knowing is the place where our root really is in uncertainty. And many of the forest masters would say that the further you get in this practice, the nearer you get to a goal, the more uncertain things are. The less you feel you really. Knowing is not about intellectual knowledge anymore. It's an intuitive sense. So how we judge each other, the views we have about the Sangha, views we have about the lay community, there's so many movements towards wanting to change, wanting to modernize, wanting whatever. There's so many views and opinions. Buddhism is famous for it. Advaita, I was not so familiar with all the background, but I'm sure it's not all that different. Human nature we're trained in the West, really. Our culture is one of judgment. We're always pointing fingers, right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse, And these snap decisions we make are often not very well informed, and we can see that we decided something, we've measured something without proper consideration. And our old habits, our habits of the mind, that we assess something, we might see a young woman screaming and shouting and shaking a young child, and you think, oh, terrible, terrible mother, awful mother, but you haven't seen the fact this child was just about to walk up to a poisonous snake, which you can't see. And the mother, out of fear and protection, runs and grabs this child out of the way. So one view, you see horrible mother. Another view, you think wonderful mother. Just a different perspective. And it goes with everything. Anything we see is coloured by the commentaries, the impressions that we add. So I would thoroughly recommend giving what you meet, the teachings you meet, the experiences you have, plenty of space in the mind, not to try and fix it in any way, but use this quality of reflection. Consider, give everything room. Because in many cases, the judgments we make, the positions we come from is such a long way away. Some of these great masters, they have incredible foundation in experience and understanding, which, it's like asking someone who usually judges a cake making contest to select the best performance racing car or something like that. Completely different. It's like you're in another world. They're not qualified. A lot of times, we're not qualified, and to be willing to be surprised, to be made wrong, to be astonished, is a place of learning and a place of where we develop. So if we feel the need to make a judgment, to set up a hierarchy, if you like, if we feel we need to have an opinion, then I suggest you watch one of my favourite little pieces of animation called The Saint Inspector. Now, on my channel, you'll see a little selection of my, well, I think I call them favourites, or can't remember what it is at the moment, but there's a little selection of videos, specials, we call it specials. And the Saint Inspector's there, you'll see him, and he's an animated cartoon. And it illustrates a lot, I think, the world as it is. And it illustrates a practice which it stems back, I think, to the Stylites, I think they're called. They were Christian contemplatives who lived on top of a post, just climbed up on the top of a post. They were totally in the open, and they would just stay there in ascetic practice under all weathers, and they'd be meditating, contemplating above the rest of society. And they would lower a little piece of string with a bowl on the end, and people pop food in it, and they'd hoist it up, and they'd just stay there. Some of them, well, there's one I think spent like 30 years up on top of a post in the year 600 AD or something. I don't know all the history, but yep, it was apparently something was done. And then there's a whole tradition around living on a post. So the Saint Inspector illustrates this figure sitting on a post, meditating. Awesome figure, you'll see. And out of the clouds comes the Saint Inspector, and he's like a very mechanical. He comes obviously a completely different world, and he makes his assessments, and he examines the ascetic meditating on top of the post, and comes to his conclusions. And to me, it's a great illustration of how the world of illustration, the world of ticking boxes, putting everything in its place, and how it relates to something which is really moving so far away from that. Very amusing. I thought I'd leave you with that as something to amuse you, but also to encourage a sense of respect, of giving all voices the chance to speak. I remember when I was in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, they seem to have a fascination for dividing into different groups. Some would be practicing, they would specialise in samatha style. Samatha practice was the most important. Some no, vipassana was most important. Others, it was abhidhamma, and they different. It's like having in my own mind, it's like having a driving school. One it's really emphasised the steering wheel, and another one that only the rear view mirror first, and one that really mostly all about gear changes, but really, maybe in order to get somewhere you need to know them all. But they have this sort of habit, if you like, good Western influence in that, of arguing about things a lot. So I met a young monk who was fed up with this. He said every time he seems to get into arguments, and he wants to kind of develop his practice without getting into arguments. And I suggested that the best answer he could have when he finds that somebody has a different view to him was to smile very gracefully and thank you very much. I said, well, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. It's not to say you think they are right, but you open the possibility. Yeah, maybe you are. Rather than feel like my view, my opinion needs to be defended at all costs, you allow people to have their space and their view. And I saw him a few days later, and he was so excited by it. He said it was a transformation for him, because suddenly he found he had space to negotiate, to move, because there was this, maybe they're right, maybe they are, maybe they're not. And to recognise that we're all seeking. There are those in the path who have all the right opportunities but haven't quite developed the open mind, openness to see clearly. We get stuck in our own little corners. We're changing direction. teachers and teachings have their heyday and their darker days. We have some, but however it is, I would strongly suggest out of my own experience that keep it open, don't get fixed to anything, keep interested, and keep almost cultivating that sense of the not knowing is fine, the not knowing is a high place. If you're coming into this don't know mind, it's very open, it's very peaceful, it's kind of aware, awake and listening. I don't know. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a place I trust most these days. Every time I felt in my life, I thought, yeah, I've got it all fixed, it's all like, got it all together, and then a little while after it kind of melts, so it falls apart. And I think, was that right? Maybe not. So that the knowing we're establishing in this path is not intellectual, it's something quite different. Things change, but the knowing and the knower remains the same. So, if we take whatever position we take, if we take no position, then I see myself everywhere. I see myself in the young child, the novices, the old men, the old ladies. I see them. I see myself everywhere when I have no place, when I take no position. The whole heart opens and I see myself in everyone. Check it out.